So when Sarah asked me to speak at this anniversary edition of the Appleton Space Conference, she suggested that I reflect on the last 20 years, how far the UK has come, what our ambitions are for the future. I knew immediately this was a dangerous and difficult assignment. If there's one thing that I've learned since being part of this sector, it's that it is full of people with very strong views about the significance or otherwise of various achievements. Please don't call them out, but that was something that I was sort of schooled in as I first arrived. So what I'm going to avoid giving a full rundown of all the highs and the lows or the learning opportunities of the past 2 decades. But I do think it's important as an exercise to reflect on how far we've come and, in fairness, on how far we still have to go. However, I would also say that events like the Appleton Space Conference are vital. They remind us that we are part of a much bigger team. They allow us to share ideas, discuss the challenges we face, and celebrate our successes together. Everyone here today is used to thinking about space for the value that it brings to society, the fundamental discoveries, the data for citizens, for communities. Chris touched on the national security imperative, the international collaborations. It goes on and on. Those are the proximate benefits, and they are very real. Economic growth is clearly very high on that list. But I also want us to explore the role that science, innovation, and technology, that space plays as a beacon of hope. The world would be a very place without the Enlightenment 3 centuries or so ago. But that is a time with resonance for today, when people fundamentally questioned the power structures amid global violence and repression. The scientific revolution, and perhaps most importantly, now the scientific method and empiricism, powered much of that enlightenment, transforming views of nature and of society with ideas flowing and technological leaps forward that shape the world. The consequences, for good and for ill, have been felt across the globe ever since. It's very tempting, I think, to see science as somehow aloof from societal change. But the opposite is true. It underpins the fabric of our society. It affects how we think of ourselves as humans and as social beings. It wasn't until William Harvey proved that blood circulated through veins and arteries that Galen's theory of balanced bile, phlegm, and blood was thrown out. It led to vastly more effective treatments, of course, but it also changed society. Medicine that worked for people gave people trust. Trust in institutions like hospitals, and in time, the National Health Service. The rise of scientific societies and academies across Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries provided safe spaces to expand human knowledge and to protect those persecuted for their views. And being a scientist, I realized I misread that. I should have said 16th and 1700s. I would hate to be 100 years out in this discussion. Freedom of thought is fragile and it is precious. The science and technology ecosystems that we build, the conferences like this one today, do more than secure future missions and in-orbit infrastructure, important though those things are. They're the lifeblood for the dissemination of thought, for the exchange of ideas between organizations and individuals. Greater understanding leads to greater tolerance, with diversity and inclusion valued as fundamental to progress, as well as a requirement of basic fairness. A more diverse and inclusive society is one where opportunity is more evenly spread and talent is allowed to blossom, whichever body it may be in. As a sector, we are trying to overcome some of the greatest engineering challenges to answer some of the biggest scientific questions and to help tackle some of the greatest global issues. To achieve these goals, we must do everything we can to protect freedom of thought, to embrace diversity of thought and experience, and to make our own sector more fully inclusive. And I will try and say a few more words about that later. Now then, a lot has changed since the first Appleton conference 20 years ago. In 2004, there were 54 orbital launches. Russia launched the most, 18, followed by the US, 16. Together, these launches put 74 objects into space, owned by 13 different countries, less than 100 objects. None of these launches were by a company called SpaceX, occasionally in the news these days. In fact, it wasn't until 2008 that the first SpaceX rocket made it into orbit. But if we fast forward to today, there have been 225 launches this year, more than one every other day. Over half of those, 118, conducted by SpaceX. As the chart beautifully shows, now I really feel like a science, I'm completely mad. Time on the x-axis, number of satellites on the y-axis, it's going up. That's what you need to see. There are currently 2,179 objects listed on the UNESA online index of objects launched into space in 2024. These objects are owned by 34 different countries. How we get into space, the frequency with which we do so, has changed very dramatically. Also on the dramatic change list, the UK Space Agency didn't exist 20 years ago. The British National Space Centre instead coordinated civil space activities. It was a partnership between 10 different government departments, agencies and research councils, a team that was doing its best but had limited resources. Is there anyone in the audience who worked at BNSC? I know there isn't. Good, Dave, I knew you were there. Congratulations and thank you. We wouldn't be here today without your efforts and those of BNSC colleagues. The global context has changed dramatically, and the national context has also changed. Our capabilities are deeper, our ambitions are higher. By now, you're probably familiar, I hope you're familiar, with the UK Space Agency's purpose. We exist to boost UK prosperity, to understand the universe, and to protect the planet and outer space. We do so in partnership, not just with academia and with industry, but with our partners at the national level, with RAL Space, of course, with the Catapult, with Space Command, government departments, including DCIT and MOD, ESA, many other agencies, and beyond. But I'd just like to take a moment to recognize some of those colleagues, more importantly, those organizations, for the work that they do. From the National Satellite Test Facility that RAL Space runs with STFC, and for those of you who are interested in some of the other things that RAL Space are doing, I just advise you to go to the back of the room later and look at the pointing and calibration system as part of microcarb that Daniele can talk you through. He taught me through at lunch. But just as much the Catapult and all they do to support a myriad of innovators and companies to blossom. I could pick out similarly for all our partners. In 2004, a student at university that you may recognize launched a new website called The Facebook. With new advancements like 3G, the way we used our mobile phones was beginning to change. But Nokia still had a 30% market share of the global mobile phone market, and only 12% of UK homes had a broadband connection. Smartphones and social media, underpinned by faster and more flexible internet connections, have shaped our lives over the last 2 decades, and Laurent spoke eloquently about how they will continue to do so. The volume of data created, captured, and consumed has increased exponentially, and our reliance on space, in particular satellite communications, has grown rapidly. SATCOMs has long been a key area of strength for the UK space sector, and over the past decade, we've been proud to host the European Centre for Space Applications and Telecommunications, EXAT, as everyone calls it, right here at Harwell. A bit of a day for showing the pictures of Harwell and then pictures of EXAT. Our expectations for connectivity are far beyond what anyone could have dreamt of in 2004, perhaps with the exclusion of Mark Zuckerberg. And we are working hard to make 5G ubiquitous, advance the development of 6G, and explore the potential of optical and quantum communications technologies. This is why I'm happy to announce that we've made available an additional £2.7 million from our Space Clusters and Infrastructure Fund for a new project led by the University of Suffolk to build the UK's largest optical test range at the Industrial Park, which is BT's R&D centre. With match funding from industry, this will focus on space-to-ground optical research and promote deeper engagement between academia and industry on optical and quantum communications and their use on national and international satellite missions. It's perhaps easy to imagine a future where more of our journeys are made by autonomous forms of transport, or where more of our deliveries arrive by drone rather than by van. But greater connectivity enabling satellite technologies is likely to unlock a range of benefits that we simply can't imagine yet. And the UK space sector will play an important role, thanks not least to the work done at EXAT and to our membership of the European Space Agency. Because EXAT embodies the shared vision of the UK Space Agency and ESA to bring space benefits down to Earth and to accelerate their use in everyday life. Over the past years, it has grown into a key part of the Harwell Space Cluster. But we know there is more to do to help it meet its full potential over the next 10 years. As Laurent mentioned, Dave is leading this work, working closely with Laurent Jaffer as head of EXAT and with Anu Oja and the team at UKSA. There are the three themes that you briefly saw: to build on the existing successes in areas like 5G and 6G, to explore ideas to expand ESA's and EXAT's remit and unleash multidisciplinary innovation, and to better leverage the unique environment of the Harwell campus for the benefit of all 22, soon to be 23, ESA member states. And I think it's easy to forget that because so many of us work at Harwell. The EXAT sits within this campus. That is very unusual for the European Space Agency. It is a real jewel that we're able to have over 100 space companies alongside the quantum work, alongside life sciences, this whole cluster in which an ESA facility is embedded. But let's just turn now to our understanding of the universe. On the 2nd of March 2004, the ESA Rosetta mission was launched, one of the 54 that I mentioned earlier. It became the first to rendezvous with a comet, the first to follow a comet on its orbit around the sun, and the first to deploy a lander to a comet's surface. I can read that out, but it's extraordinary, awe-inspiring, in my view, to think about what that actually means. Actually achieve that. Those achievements are made possible because of the contributions that UK science and industry, working with partners across Europe and beyond, achieved together. 2004 also saw the landings of two NASA rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, on the surface of Mars. These missions opened our eyes on different worlds, from the primordial features of a comet to the undulating dunes and ancient riverbeds of our nearest planetary neighbour. Their achievements are more than just a list of scientific objectives completed or engineering milestones overcome, important though they are. They provoke a deep emotional reaction. They subtly change how we perceive our place in the universe. And there is so much more to come. The Rosalind Franklin rover will launch in 2028. It will carry a 2-meter-long drill and look for signs of past life on Mars with its in situ laboratory. If such signs are found, the UK will be at the heart of arguably the greatest scientific discovery in history: life beyond the Earth. This is why it was such a high priority to save this mission at the last ESA Ministerial Council. And I'm personally very glad that we did. Science is king when it comes to missions like Rosalind Franklin, but the benefits are broader. For example, there will be a UK-built radioisotope heater unit on the lander, designed in Leicester using americium extracted from the UK's nuclear material held at Sellafield. Historically, these units have only been produced in the US and in Russia. Their supply is limited for very obvious reasons. They are, however, critical to our exploration of deep space, and there is growing global interest in in establishing another supply. I was last night reading the NASA capability gaps document for 2024. It's a fascinating document if you look at it. 187 capabilities forensically analysed in the community, NASA and beyond. And if you look at what the top risks, the top two gaps are power through the lunar night and high levels of power to the lunar surface. When we talk about the importance of things like americium-241 extraction in order to provide that ongoing power, that is because these are things that the world needs. Now, it just so happens that Sellafield in Cumbria is Europe's largest nuclear site, and the UK has a large amount of americium, which is ideally suited for RHUs. The trick, of course, is how to extract it. That's where our work with the National Nuclear Laboratory comes in. Together, we have found a way to turn what is a serious liability for the country into a serious asset, worth billions, and to say nothing of the strategic value. And we expect many more missions to be using this technology in the years and decades ahead. When I first spoke at Appleton virtually in 2021, during the pandemic, we were looking ahead to the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope, images of which you see right there. I want to talk about another space telescope today, the Habitable Worlds Observatory. I know Martin has a session on this later, so I don't want to steal his thunder or his sandwiches, but this mission has the potential to fundamentally reshape how we think about our place in the universe when it launches in the 2040s. It will be the first telescope designed specifically to search for signs of life on exoplanets. When I started my physics degree somewhere over a quarter of a century ago, we had no definitive experimental evidence for exoplanets. Today we know of around 6,000. That number is increasing dramatically as JWST continues its work. The second UK community for Habitable Worlds was held last month at the Open University with more than 100 people in attendance. There was a real sense of opportunity associated with this mission, and we want to think big about how the UK can best support it. The UK's leading expertise in exoplanet science, instrumentation, and data analysis means we have the opportunity to play a leading role in this era-defining, perhaps humanity-defining mission. I know that our academic and industry R&D community has a strong ambition to lead an international consortium to develop one of the science instruments for HWO, building, of course, on the success of MIRI on JWST. But I'm equally aware that the window we have to secure this opportunity is short. So we need to establish the UK's role quickly, and there is much we will need to do in turn this in from ambition into reality. For anyone wishing to know more, I encourage you to speak to Martin Berstow and our new chief scientist, where are you, Adam, at the Space Agency, Adam Amara, both of whom are here today, or to get in touch with Caroline Harper, who runs space science at the agency, as soon as possible. And at the opposite end of the funding scale, we know that our R&D community also has ambitions to lead small but significant science missions through ESA's new mini F-class exploratory call, or in collaboration with bilateral partners like the US or emerging space nations. Again, I'd strongly encourage people, if you are interested, to contact Caroline and the team. But of course, the most important planet for humanity is our own. In 2004, the first framework agreement between ESA and the EU came into force. This enabled the space component of GMES, the Global Monitoring for Environment and Security, and was followed by the first meeting of the European Space Council. GMES went on to become known as Copernicus, and today is the most advanced Earth observation system in the world. And after a brief absence, can't imagine why, the UK is once again participating fully in the programme. We hope to see Sentinel-1C launch successfully this evening, and with it, the return to flight of Vega C. The launch ensures the continuity of the Sentinel-1 mission and its use of SAR technology to image the Earth day and night and in all weathers. We will continue improving the accuracy and uptake of satellite Earth observation data with missions such as Truths and our work on the National EO Data Hub, and on ensuring there are robust monitoring standards in place to support climate action through observations from space. Some of that most important work on monitoring is taking place in space-based methane measurements. We're driving forward these efforts globally with the National Physical Laboratory and NASA JPL. The aim is to have the standards for satellite-derived methane emissions adopted as the official method in the framework of the Global Methane Pledge during next year's COP in Brazil. I think it's important to have these clear aims as to why we do the things that we do and how we embed them in the global community. I think Alice made that point about even better if they are at the heart and part of the core UN standards and beyond. Supporting the development of methane emissions best practices is one of the 4 priorities as the UK chairs the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites for the next year. The other 3 are using Earth observation to improve public services, to increase the use of space data in the global stocktakes of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and to inspire the next generation through a new CEOS in Schools initiative. So I look forward to the plenary next year in Bath. Our reliance on space technologies will only grow, not just Earth observation, communications, PNT, and of course, the in-orbit economy. One of the biggest threats to space-based infrastructure, as was talked about earlier in the swimmer presentation, as well as by Chris, is from space weather. That's why our leadership of the ESA visual mission is so important. Advanced warning means better preparedness and ultimately better protection for both our assets in space and the infrastructure on Earth that we rely on. And our leadership on space sustainability is equally vital. I mentioned Sellafield earlier in the context of radioisotope heater units. If anyone's ever visited Sellafield, you'll know it's a fascinating place, but it's also a terrifying place. It's the physical manifestation of the Cold War imperative to generate more and more nuclear fuel. Consideration as what to do with that resulting waste in the future was probably not the primary concern, for understandable reasons. The latest forecast of decommissioning Sellafield is £136 billion. Perhaps there's an analogy here, or at least a learning. We cannot treat space this way. There is far too much to lose. We need to consider the future in our decision-making now. This isn't just about doing the responsible thing. There are significant economic opportunities associated with in-orbit servicing, as well as assembly and manufacturing. And the UK is well placed to take a significant share of what is estimated to be an $11 billion market by 2031. In-orbit servicing alone, we have growing companies like Astroscale, ClearSpace, Orbit Fab, NASA, Lumi, D-Orbit, and many more besides. It was at the Appleton Space Conference in 2009 when Lord Drayson announced that the UK would finally have its own space agency. In his speech, he said the following: "You'd be hard-placed to find another sector where industry and the research base are so wedded together. As we rebalance the economy, this is precisely the high value, high skill, technologically advanced area we must focus on for jobs, for growth, for prosperity." I think what he was trying to say was that space is a team sport, and that this sector can help kickstart the economy. Now, I say space is a team sport with a tongue-in-cheek because it's become something of a mantra. It was a type of the speech I gave at Appleton in 2022, and I think my colleagues, some of you in the room will tell you, is a phrase I repeat often. The depth and breadth of collaboration found within this sector is nothing short of astonishing, and it makes us better collectively. In the spirit of being a team, then, we pull together when things get tough. We're going to be honest, upfront about the challenges we face, and remember that we all have agency with a little a. This, again, is something we talk about a lot in the agency with a big A. And it applies just as well to the wider sector. Not everything is in our control. Space doesn't have a funding settlement yet for the coming years, for example, like the vast majority of government. When we do receive it, I expect it to be challenging. I don't think we'll be able to do everything we would want to do. But this is a team that's delivered when it's been tested before, and I fully expect it to do so again. Because we do this by making active choices, by walking towards the issues, not hiding from them. We can control how we plan for all manner of scenarios. We can work together to unlock greater demand for space services from businesses and within government, including the NHS. We can help educate investors about the opportunities to get involved with space. We can make sure we are drawing on the widest possible talent pools and making the sector an attractive and welcoming place to work. We have a great deal of support from our ministers in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology and beyond. And by working collaboratively and constructively, we can build our successes and strengthen the sector's position. Because we should all be proud, as well as humble, about how far this sector has come since the first Appleton Space Conference. We have 3 new astronauts, UK rocket launches planned from next year. We have the National Space Operations Centre and a National Active Debris Removal mission in development. We're a strong member of the European Space Agency, a reliable partner of international collaborations. Space is on the agenda at COP because of the vital role satellites play in monitoring and tackling the climate emergency. I'm fortunate in my role to see more of the sector than many and to meet more of the people who make up the UK space team. And it is the people, first and foremost, that matter. If you take one thing from today, let it be that. Think about how your organisation attracts, develops and retains talent. Consider whether your policies and processes might be more inclusive and attract a broader array of talent. This is something I know we have to get right in the agency. Around 46%, just under half of our staff are women, a fifth are from an ethnic minority. But those are the figures overall. These figures vary when we look across different grades, and we have more to do to attract diverse talent into more senior roles. We're reviewing all our recruitment processes to reduce the number of talented individuals that we lose along the recruitment journey, from the point of application through to the interview stage and on to jobs being offered. We're also making sure that our public events are more representative of the community that we serve. Whether that is through greater diversity on panels or making a wider range of attendees feel welcome. I hope you will notice a big difference at the UK Space Conference in Manchester in July next year, building on the feedback that we've received. And I want to hear if there are other areas where we can use our influence as an agency to change things for the better. It's something that the sector as a whole must do right. Recruiting staff is the most frequently cited barrier to growth in the Size and Health Survey. It makes sense to draw on the widest pool of talent, as well as being the responsible thing to do. The Space Skills Alliance, led by Heidi Tierman and Joseph Dudley, are doing some excellent work, and I would encourage you all to read the next edition of the Space Census when it's released in January. Since 2020, there are some green shoots of progress, but there is also a long journey ahead. We are a sector that is 86% white, 64% male. The proportion of people working in the sector who had free school meals is around half the national average. Each of us has an important role to play, not just in inspiring future careers in the space sector, but also championing the value diversity brings. Because I feel optimistic about the future. I find myself in too many meetings and at too many events with groups of people who frankly look and sound just like me. Progress has been made, but we still have a very long way to go, and we cannot wait another 20 years to get it right. We are all busy people. We can't go to every single event, so let's attend the ones that matter most, like the Appleton Space Conference, where we connect, where we spread the word of the benefits of space, and which are genuinely diverse and inclusive. Let me finish by thanking Sarah, Ralspace, and everyone behind the scenes who has made Appleton Space Conference possible for the last 20 years and for the decades to come by thanking everyone here today for all that you do. While we all have busy roles and our eyes are often on the detail, it pays to keep at the front of our minds that in the darkness of space shines that beacon of hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. You didn't let us down. As I said, a great orator and a brilliant storyteller. Thank you. Questions, there must be some. We'll take a few. We will move on quickly, but we will take some questions.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for that very inspirational talk. It's Catherine Courtney here.
Hi, Catherine.
The question I have is space is a team sport, but for the UK to really punch above its weight, what's important is how we forge international partnerships so that we can leverage other people's brain trusts and, you know, funding streams, etc. In the research community, that's incredibly difficult to do, and some of the programs that the agency has introduced in past years have helped with that. But I'm quite curious to hear how you feel the new industrial strategy, the new administration will view that sort of cross-border funding, and, you know, your thoughts on how that might be unlocked a bit more in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So it's a pivotal moment. Like, not many of you have lived through changes of government, but you have to remember that when you're in the job that you're in, for many people, including my organisation, it's a seismic change after 14 years. And as part of that change, it's not surprising that the new government reviews all funding through the spending review, that it reviews the industrial strategy, it reviews its approach to strategic defence through the strategic defence review. But right in the heart of having that conversation, the government has made a number of statements. The Prime Minister has been out and about in Europe and beyond, seeking to strengthen the relationships. The thing that we did over the last 3 years was to recommit to the European Space Agency and drive a program of bilateral agreements, not least with the US, with Canada, with Japan, with Australia, but beyond as well, both on science and exploration and commercially. My view is that those bilaterals really bore fruit, as well as the ESA relationship, that we're able to be in programs like Helioswarm or Lightbird because of those things. So when we're putting forward the case, in lights is the value of international cooperation and collaboration alongside the data for citizens and communities, alongside economic growth, and alongside the imperative of national security and protection. That's the argument we make. I think it's being heard, but, you know, at the end of the day, we all have to see where the funding will be.
Hi, Paul. For years, people wanting to trumpet, celebrate innovation in UK space might have used a picture of the Sabre engine. They might have used a picture of Skylon on the front cover of their brochure. Have you had time to reflect on the demise of reaction engines?
Yeah, thanks, John. John from ex-BBC, just in case anyone doesn't know John. It's a really important, so I did, and of course we knew some of the information, but not all of the information because it was a commercial organisation, as the situation was unfolding. When any company doesn't make it, it's upsetting. Right? I mean, fundamentally, I spent most of my life in the private sector, and I feel that. But when a company that's as iconic as Reaction Engines doesn't make it, I think it is doubly so. To offer one reflection, because there genuinely are many. I've got to offer two, if it's okay. One is, I think the fact that we're having an industrial strategy is a good part of the solution. I think it's very important, particularly in space. True in, I'm sure, lots of other areas, but space, I guess, is what I know better. I think it's very important that we're doing that across government. But the other challenge is, if we look at where we spent money in the past, the Sabre engine grant program was a real outlier. It was much bigger in amounts than anything else, as far as I'm aware, that we were doing at the time on an individual program. Now, if we're going to fund high risk, high reward innovation, having one in the tank it's called high risk for a reason. And I know, that colleagues in Reaction also knew that, but it's not the right approach to only fund one thing. will do better to have a portfolio of high risk, high reward, balanced, of course, with managing slightly more lower risk, but lower reward innovations as well. But that's the main thing I would say is never get ourselves into a situation again where we choose one thing and it becomes that beacon, and it's then becomes binary. And most companies don't end up being billion-pound companies. That's just the reality. So better to have a portfolio.
Is there time for one more question? I've got one here.
Well, thanks so much. We've got a question from one of our online participants, Chris Lee. How will space as a team sport unfold with the new US administration and Europe's own search for an autonomous space strategy? And how can the UK play a key role in this debate?
The thing with Chris is he asks these anodyne questions. Thank you, Chris, for well, let's see how it plays out. Let's see how the UK's foreign policy plays out. I'm a civil servant. I work within the constructs. We have the announcement yesterday of the proposed new NASA administrator. So the £1 or $1, if you want, in 3 in space is spent in the US. Is by far the largest country for space. So we have to work, and we should work with the US. Whatever the flavor of government is, that's what we do. It is an old relationship. It's a strong relationship. So we have all manner of existing programs, not least Rosalind Franklin. And I hope we do more, just like I hope we do more with the European Space Agency. Whatever else, we live at interesting times.
Thank you. I think that's probably a really good point to finish on. Thank you very much, Paul. It's always really powerful to reflect back, because we don't do that often enough to see quite how far we've come. There are always challenging times, but we've come a long way in the last 20 years, and it's great to see your version of the future in the next 20 years, which is full of hope. So we'll say thank you to Paul again in a moment. As is the tradition at the Appleton Space Conference, we do make a presentation to our keynote speaker. Normally an image that is relevant to both parties. And here we've got an image of the Harwell Harwell campus with the Space City now that the agency are here. We have the large national satellite test facility, which is a major national resource, but of course, not forgetting the curiosity-driven research and science of James Webb Space Telescope. So Paul, thank you very much indeed for your wonderful speech and coming to the Appleton Space Conference. Thank you.